Hi guys, welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, the show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today is another fantastic day. I'm above ground, that's good. I'm actually in a country that is safe. It is cold here in New Zealand. We're a bit on the freezy side, but hey, that's okay. And you know, what do you do when you're cold and freezy? You think of nice warm places. So what better to do than actually get a guest from the other side of the world who is at the moment sweating and having glasses of water and little ice cubes dotted around the body to keep cool. So I've got Dr. Ashley Wellman here with me, and I'm that excited to explore her story and see what lessons we can learn from her. So Ashley, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming onto my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of it.
How hot is it at the moment with you?
100 degrees here.
Oh, yeah, right.
Miserable and definitely sweating.
Oh. No, it is Texas. It is what it is.
Yes, everything's bigger here, including the temperature. So.
Well, exactly right. Now I live in Rotorua, which is a small place, and it is actually located inside a volcano, a dormant volcano, wow. And which means we have got quite a beautiful microclimate. So if the north gets cyclones and get pounded with rain, we get 5 raindrops. Wow. And when the south gets parched, well, we get 5 raindrops. So it's perfect. So it is, I'm pleased where we are at, and it's actually a very safe place. So the invitation is there. Once the madness is over, please come visit. We're a great place here.
I can't wait. I'm on the first flight after all this COVID gets over.
Oh, please. So true. So true. Ashley, you are a doctor, and which is bloody cool. Now, a doctor doesn't need to be medicine. A doctor can be far more fascinating. What is your doctorate in?
So my daughter would tell you I'm not a real doctor, but she's 6. So what does she know? I have my PhD in Criminology, Law, and Society. I got it from the University of Florida. And I actually specialize in homicide survivors, the family who survives a homicide, and sexual assault survivors, grief, trauma, anything, lighthearted. Is what my kind of area is. So I'm very blessed to work with some really strong, amazing people who have inspired me along the way.
That's beautiful, isn't it? And that is, I guess, the story of our lives, because you have no idea who you come across in your life, because we all are living our lives, and death and trauma and grief is part and parcel of it. Mm. Yet it is something that so few of us actually talk about and learn to deal with. There is no course on how do you deal with death. There is nothing like that out there. It's weird, isn't it?
It's very weird. What's even more weird is how taboo we've made this subject. We all die. And I think there's this expectation of, when an older person dies and they've lived their good life, that's normal. But anything else, that's not a prescription we've heard about. We haven't heard of people dying suddenly in a car crash. We don't deal with grief of a homicide or things like that. And so one of the things that I would love to see happen is for people to share stories of grief, of trauma, and say it's hard and messy, but there is also life after death, and death doesn't have to be this thing that will forever be something to kind of fear and be an ugly word in your life or a moment in your life.
Very, very true. But I think that's a sign of our society where we have developed into. Go back 50 years, 80 years, it would have been normal for your parents and great-grandparents to slaughter an animal, to actually realize that you have to take a life in order to eat. And we are living in a society where meat comes from the supermarket, where we don't have that proximity to ending life. Hunters are being portrayed as cruel and weird. A few years ago, I did a butcher's course.
Oh, wow.
So I learned how to do that, and I did that in a very holistic kind of setting, a very with people barefoot on the grass
Oh,
kind of a feeling. And so
yeah.
we killed our own animals
Mhm.
and then took them apart. And to take a life was one of the most bizarre things,
Mhm.
and it brought it close to me how deaf that this is actually something we never talk about and we
Yeah.
never get exposed to. When people are dying nowadays, more often than not, they die in rest homes, they die in hospitals, they die on the street, as you have mentioned.
Mhm.
They are dead. We don't see them dying. We are
Mhm.
not part of that journey. And therefore, I think that is one of the biggest problems, that we have removed ourselves from reality so much.
I think you hit it right there. It's not real to us anymore. It's on the news. It's someone else. It's always someone else. It's never going to be you. And so I think because we sensationalize so much of the death, especially in my country, that violence is something that is it's normalized, and things are explained away that, oh, this person was doing drugs, or this person was a dancer, or this person smoked, or this person drank. There's always an excuse, and there's always that safe feeling that it's not going to happen to us. And if it does, very rarely are we capable and ready to handle that.
And it's interesting that you say that, because obviously you are, first of all, we should go back in time, because how the hell did you become a criminologist?
I'm weird.
No, I'm weird. Okay. That's why you are on the show here.
Yes. No, other than being odd, which has always kind of been my personality, since I was a little girl, I've been obsessed with true crime. And I remember being probably 10, and I made a binder for my FBI, tryout, that I wanted to be in the Federal Bureau of Investigations and be an agent. And so, at high school parties, I was the cool kid that would call my mom if weed came out, I'd be crying because I wanted to be in the federal government. And so to me, anything I could get my hands on about, I don't know, serial killers, or, some kind of conspiracy theories or things like that, I loved it. And my dad actually really enjoys true crime too. My mom gets on to us about not at dinner, or, not again, let's not talk about all that. She would like to be as far removed from kind of the gruesome as possible. And so for my dad and I, it was just kind of a bond that we had. And then as I grew up, I actually had a college advisor tell me, don't study that, because I could only be a police officer. That's what she told me, which is not true for anyone who loves crime. But she said, you don't want to be a police officer. So I kind of diverted from that and did special event planning and that kind of stuff as a younger girl. And then I was working with law enforcement for one of my events. And as I was working with them, I said, why didn't I pursue my passion? Which is, come full circle. Again, I'm in the middle of, a period where I'm going, is it time to pursue your passion? And I went back to school and got my master's and PhD in criminology.
Cool. How long did it take you? What is the...
5 years. I did it in the shortest time you can do. So usually it's about 2 years for your master's, 3 years for your PhD after, normal university. And some people usually take 8-9 years. I was in and out. I said, I got to get going. I really wanted to be in the community working and doing the research. That I was doing out in the field.
What did you specialize in for your doctorate?
Yeah. So I had actually gone into this concept of I was going to study cold case homicides or unsolved homicides. And I wanted to know how police worked those cases and what those case files look like. And then one day, as I'm in this police department working, this mom came in and she said, I just want to know what happened to my daughter, beep, what happened to my daughter. And one of the detectives said, oh, Ashley will talk to you. And we sat outside for 4 hours talking about the murder of her daughter. And I remember continuously saying, I'm so sorry, I don't have answers for you. I'm so sorry, I don't have answers for you. And she said, I didn't come for answers. I came for someone to listen to me. And so that moment I said, well, maybe that's my calling, is to share these stories that no one wants to talk about and that they're too scared to share. So I studied the lived experiences of cold case homicide families. And since I've worked a lot with homicide survivors, that term's kind of bizarre, but it's just the families left behind, during homicides, and sexual assault survivors, and people trying to process unimaginable trauma.
Wow. Wow, what a journey. But it only shows that if you expose yourself to the universe, sometimes the universe calls upon you in the most surprising ways. And here you found yourself suddenly with a calling. Wow, wow. It is quite a challenging thing. So for me, for example, as a doctor, I felt compelled to help people where there was little hope, people with chronic pain, things like that. And unfortunately, I did not have the support and the system in place to help me deal with all the emotions that were offloaded onto me. I mean, is there a system in place for you professionally to get counseling this way?
Well, so we're not real great about mental health in America. We're trying to get better. That's not really something that professionally is, highly supported for us. But for me, when I felt this deep calling and need to do it, which I would talk to a family, I'd get back in the car and I would say, thank you, God, for not allowing me to understand this on the level that, I could. Thank you for making, having my family healthy and happy. And a lot of journaling, a lot of meditation, a lot of kind of reflection on their stories. And again, I would, at the end of each one, I would seek that resilience and that hope and the joy that these families were sharing with me in the midst of pain, in the midst of trauma. There was always something beautiful about their story. And so I would keep that in my head to kind of, keep me on a healthy path, and hugging on a beautiful baby and, loving on your family. That definitely helps a lot as well.
Okay. Wow. No, I didn't have that. I hit the bottle. I didn't hug the baby. So there are obviously different choices that we all make, and I think yours was far better than mine. Having said that, here you were, a criminologist who has developed a passion for the field, who has worked, and you're a young woman. You're out there. You have got the happy, bouncy, go-getter, I'll do that. Well, 9 years? Nah, we do that in 5 years.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm going to change the world.
That's right. It's right. But then one day the world said, nah, you're a bit too cocky. Let's humble you.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
So like you were saying, I was on this jet setting path of being super successful as an academic. And it's so bizarre because if you're not in academia, success looks so radically different. And for an academic, it's very prescribed. You get a tenure track job, you proceed towards this position where you're going to be super secure and have this, this job. And I did that. I got tenure at one of my universities and I wasn't happy. And so my husband said, let's jump, let's move. And we did. And we ended up here in Texas. I gave up a lot. I gave up a title of associate professor to step down to a much lower position with a promise of moving up. And we get here. And I remember being so excited about a new chapter. And the day before I started school, my husband, Buddy, he said, hey, Mama, go upstairs and take a nap. He was watching golf. I don't know if golf's a big thing where you are, but he loved, good. I don't get it either. So he loved Tiger Woods, and Tiger Woods was actually winning this golf tournament, and I hate golf. So he told me, go take a nap, which I will never turn down. So I went upstairs in our condo, and immediately as I got into bed, I heard this glass break downstairs. And I screamed down thinking my little girl had broken something. I said, what broke? And he said, nobody said anything. And I kept screaming and I said, Buddy, what broke? And nothing. So I run down the stairs. I knew something was wrong. And I run down and I see him lying in the middle of the hallway, seizing. And I panicked. I just started screaming and I ran upstairs to get my phone, come back down. I'm calling 911, which is our emergency response number. And in that time, my 4-year-old daughter has come around the corner and she sees him. And the sight is horrific. You know, he's gasping for air in his eyes. He looks terrified. And my little girl's screaming, you know, save my dad. Please save my dad. What's wrong with dad? And in the moment, I could not attend to her. You know, in hindsight, for months, I was like, I was such a bad mom in that moment, but I wasn't. You know, I was doing the best I could, but I really felt guilt for that in the moment. And I was screaming for him to wake up, and I kept, you know, slapping his face and grabbing his face. And the 911 operator said, you know, Ashley, you got to calm down. People are coming to help you. So fire trucks come, ambulances come, and they get us out of the house. And they say, he's okay. He has a heartbeat. And as long as he maintains a heartbeat, he's going to be okay. And so in that moment, when they said that, I said, okay. I am going to think of what am I going to say to him when he wakes up? And my thought was like, I was going to say, you son of a bitch, you know, don't ever do that to me again, because he's such a critical part of my life. And I couldn't imagine, I mean, everything that I had predicted for my life included him by my side. And then another ambulance comes up and another fire truck comes up and they run inside. And I keep asking, is he breathing? Is he breathing? Does he have a heart rate? And no one answers me. So finally I grabbed onto this guy's shirt. And I said, tell me, does he have a, you know, expletive heartbeat? Yes or no? And he says, no, he doesn't. And I went, oh my God. So immediately it changes, like, this is not going to be good. I follow the ambulance to the emergency room. They tried for 60 minutes to resuscitate him in front of me, which is another very traumatic image. I never knew how violent that was. His poor little body's lying there and, you know, they're hurting him is what it looks like. And they got him back 4 times. So each time I was like, oh God, okay, we're going to be all right. And finally the doctor turned to me and she said, stop it. And I was taken aback, you know, because I'm cheerleading for him to live. And she said, stop it. If he wakes up, he's brain dead. And she said, you need to stop. And in that moment, I knew we had a conversation many times that said, if that's ever my reality, do not let me live like that, you know? And so we stopped. And in that moment, my whole world crashed down around me. You know, I had the perfect family and this, you know, great job that I was going to pursue. And I got to be the mom that I could say, you know, I got to go to work. I got to do this and that. And all of a sudden, in a moment, I'm a widow at 34. I'm a single mom. My best friend in the world is dead. And I watched it. My daughter watched it, you know, and I remember kissing him goodbye and saying, it was so scary because I didn't want them to take him, you know? And I kept saying, like, where are you taking him? Are you going to take him away? And they said, you can stay as long as you want and, you know, say goodbye to him, which is odd. You know, it's like, how do you do that? And so I said, you know, I kissed on him for a minute and I said, I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I promise you I'm going to give your daughter a life that she deserves. And I didn't know how I was going to do that, you know, and it was odd because there was a moment as I'm telling him goodbye, I could feel a dramatic difference. You know, like in one moment I was kissing my husband and thinking, you know, I'm having a conversation to say goodbye. And then a moment later, I could almost feel his spirit leave where it was just a body. And it was very scary and I got very uncomfortable. And so I told them, you know, take him. And then, you know, it's kind of like, okay, go home. And that was where I was left.
Don't. Do you want to take a moment?
No, I'm good.
It's really hard to listen to that because for me as an anesthetist, I've been part of resuscitation teams for most of my life. We get called when shit hits the fan, and we get called when there are patients like your husband are arriving in the emergency department. I think for me as a doctor, I want to just shed a bit of light onto what has occurred there. Firstly, again, we are so removed from the real life. When we see resuscitations in films, first of all, 80% of them, the patients survive and typically look up and shake it off and kiss their rescuer. What a heap of bullshit.
Awful. It was awful.
I know. So when you come to a point where you need chest compressions and breathing, then the odds are stacked against you, number one. Number two, in order to keep the blood pumping around, what we need to do is we need to compress the chest by 1/3 to actually be efficient. So the little bit of that you see in films, no. So when you say it looked traumatic, I can very much appreciate that, because we are literally jumping.
Yeah. I saw so many people. There must have been 9 or 10 people that were alternating in a circle trying to do CPR on him. And I'm talking like a 6'6" man who's crying while he's doing it, which was so sweet. You know, like in hindsight, I'm like, God bless him. His heart was breaking because he knew what was going on. You know, he knew he wasn't going to make it. And here's this young woman screaming for her husband to live, you know, so he's doing it and you can hear his chest breaking. I could see bruising already starting. It was just, he looked, you know, it almost deforms the human being because his whole chest was ruined. And so, you know, we watch Grey's Anatomy over here, you know, that's like a big show, or ER or whatever. And it seems so, it's so gentle and it's going to be great. That was an added layer of trauma for sure.
Yeah. But then at the same token, we doctors have learned that it is so important to actually have the family there. For us to, or for me, if I was, God forbid, if I was in your situation and I see that my wife is in severe trouble and then someone pushes me out the door and closes the door on me, oh boy, no.
It'd be bad.
So whenever I ran or was part of a resuscitation, I always made sure that relatives were there, but that there was a nurse standing with the relatives and was quietly explaining what we were doing, why we were doing it, and that we were doing our utmost to rescue the life of their loved ones.
I will say in hindsight, one of the things that it was, I wouldn't have traded it for the world, because I made a promise to be with him till death do us part, and through sickness and in health. And I was there till he got to say, you know, till they said he was gone. And even through the cremation process, I remember kissing him goodbye. And I said, I told you I'd be here till the end. And I am. And so I remember thinking, like, I don't know if I can see him again before he was cremated, you know? And I said, the last time I saw him, he had tubes and blood and all kinds of stuff. And so I remember going in there and kissing him goodbye. And it was the most beautiful moment of my life, because he was so peaceful. He wasn't hurting anymore. And I got to say goodbye to him, and I honored my vows. And, you know, it kind of came full circle to say, yes, that was horrific. But had I not been there, you know, I would have questioned, what if my cheerleading would have saved him? What if he had heard my voice, you know? And we did everything we could have done. And, you know, it was just his time, and it makes no sense, and it's unfair, and it sucks. But it was just his time. And so, you know, the world stopped and said, you know, you're going to rewrite what you thought was going to happen.
How old was he when he passed away?
He was 44, really, really, really healthy. He had a pulmonary embolism, come to find out. There had been no leg injuries. He had not been traveling. There had been no pain in his legs, nothing. But somehow a clot caught in his lungs. And, you know, so in hindsight, you know, I was thinking, you know, should I have done CPR? Should I have done this and that? And it wouldn't have helped, because that clot was, you know, so large that they said it was instantaneous, that there's no way he could have survived that.
And I guess it just shows that nothing can be taken for granted.
Yeah.
as a doctor and as nurses, there are so many times when I look one of my colleagues or one of my nurses in the eyes, and there's just this moment of recognition, because we say, look, you can't take anything for granted. You don't know what tomorrow brings. So right now, if you feel I really would love to call my husband and tell him I love him, then you
do
fucking well do it.
Do
okay?
it.
Exactly. Whenever you think about something, actually do it.
Yeah.
And I make a point, certainly in my team, to support that frame of mind, that willingness to accept that death and nasty things are part and parcel of our life. And it's just a matter of when it hits you.
And
So
we don't get to control that, you know? And I think we live with such a forecast. I mean, how many trips had we said, like, oh, one day we'll do this? And how many things had we said, oh, one day together we're going to do this? And so it's one of those things where it's like, damn it, you should have, like, do it. If you have this idea that you want to do something, make it happen, because life isn't guaranteed. Tomorrow's not guaranteed,
Damn. This must have been hitting you like a train.
Yeah.
Did your training help you at all? Or were you so close to what was happening that all those things that you learned and that you were telling others were sounding false and like a heap of shit?
Both. Everything was shit. So everything around me was shit. But both, in the moment, I literally was numb and paralyzed of what am I supposed to do? It's like, bye, have a good day, that they didn't really say that, but that was kind of what it was like, bye,
Exactly.
So yeah. And I was like, okay, no one told me how to raise a mourning baby and a grieving baby. No one told me how to navigate life by myself, because Buddy was such a kind of an anchor for me. I'm very much a dreamer and anxious and all of these things. And he was my low key anchor, cheerleader, but like in moderation, he'd make sure that things were done the way they needed to be done. And so I was thinking, like, why me? Why would you leave me when he was, in my head, I thought, you should have taken me, And so I remember first thing I did was drive to Barnes and Noble, literally after I left the hospital. That's our big bookstore. I drove straight to our big bookstore and I went to the children's department and I was crying in the aisle, and this poor bookseller walks around. I'm like, so my husband just died. I need all of your children's bereavement books. And he was like, oh my God. Poor guy. I'm so sorry, whoever that was. So I knew what I needed. I could not tell my daughter by myself. I needed something. I had no family around. And so I went and got these books, How Do Dinosaurs Die and The Invisible String and, everything else. And then I get home, someone brings my daughter back to me. And I remember her walking in and she said, oh, I brought Dad this toy. Can I go give him the toy? And I said, Daddy's not here. And I knew the whole way home when I was driving and I knew this person was bringing my daughter home. I said, you have to tell her the truth. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no Dad's on vacation. Dad's flying around. Dad is dead. He didn't go to sleep. You know what I mean? Because if she went to sleep, I knew she'd think, oh, she's going to die too. So I had to very much talk to her as an adult in a little body, and gently tell her Daddy's heart didn't make it. His body shut down. He died. And now he's going to heaven. For us, our faith, says he goes to heaven, and she knows who Jesus is and those kinds of things. So we talked about that, and that he was with old Papa, which was his great grandfather who had just passed, or his grandfather who had passed away. And so, and the wails, she just wailed for, I would say, weeks. There would just be moments where she'd break into wailing for him and calling for him. And, but I knew that. So I knew that from my training. I needed to tell her as an adult, like in real terms, what happened to her dad, in kid-friendly terms. And when I dropped her off at school a week later, I was so mad that he wasn't there, and so sad that I took her to her first day of school with her new little backpack, you know what I mean? And he wasn't there to walk her to class, I was mad. And so I broke down in the car as soon as I dropped her off, and I drove straight to a grief support location. And I told them, I said, I cannot do this by myself. I need your help. I need you to help my daughter and I. I also had heard about a therapy called EMDR. It's a rapid eye movement type of therapy to process trauma. I had suggested it to several of my sexual assault survivors and parents who, had held their children while they died after being, shot or stabbed or something like that. And I said that imagery adds so much emotional damage, and so many layers that don't come with things like, oh, they gracefully passed away in their sleep. Do you know what I mean? Those kinds of things. They're still hurt, but that emotional, physical, visceral reaction isn't there in some deaths. Mine, there was a lot. And so I went to EMDR therapy to try to stop, every time I closed my eyes, I wouldn't see him and dying, and I wouldn't see the compressions and the CPR. It saved me. It was amazing. So now I can look at that moment holding him in the bathroom. And, one of the questions she said was like, was he alone? And I said, no. And she's like, did you do the best you could? Yes. And she's like, in hindsight, he was gone there. That's where he stopped breathing, And so she's like, he was no longer hurting and you were holding him. What more beautiful thing? You were begging him to live. She was like, what more beautiful moment than to have someone fight for you, And so like, it kind of allowed me to get rid of some of the shame and grief and regret of should I have done something different. And then the emergency room sounds silly, but my daughter called him Superman, And so in the emergency room, instead of him being nude and hurt and, the chest compressions and things like that, she taught me to kind of turn down the noise and see it as a much more peaceful scene. So my doctors weren't doctors. They were angels because he was already dead. And instead of being nude and hurt, he was wearing his Superman costume and could go, be in heaven. And so it's those kinds of things. So even on, 2 years later, if I close my eyes and I go to a really, if I'm like, oh, I was the CPR, like maybe a show triggers me or something, then I'll sit back and I'll go, nope, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. He was already gone. The nurses are there as angels and he's in his Superman costume. So like that kind of, that therapy that I had told people to go get saved me. And knowing you can't grieve by yourself. And then I think one of the things I have done right, I'm not perfect by any means. I've had really ugly days, but I think one of the most beautiful parts of our grief journey has been my commitment to grieving as an individual and as a family, and making sure that my daughter sees her mom grieve and cry and be mad and be disappointed, fail, struggle, because then she knows she's okay to do that. It's safe for her to do that. And so many people, to protect their kids, won't grieve with them. It's a balance. It's a balance because I could burden her with my grief. I'm not, there's moments where I'm like, I need to step away. But I definitely make a cognizant effort. If she sees me crying or walks in on me crying, it's not like, get away, I'm fine. I'm not fine. And it's okay that I'm not fine. And on days where she's not fine, I'm then a safe space for her to grieve.
And it's so important. And you were, however stupid that may now sound, the lucky one, because you knew there were grief support groups. You knew that there is a framework in place because you had recommended others to seek that help. But that is quite unusual. The reality, unfortunately, is that for many people I have met over the years, there is no support there. There is very short support. Yeah. And even friends and family, we're not comfortable with it. And people can't do the uncomfortable. Yeah. And so it's hard. I mean, one of the biggest things I tell people is don't stop being there for people. If you got to set a timer on your phone, 3 months later, check on your widow friend, check in on the mother who just lost her child. Then do it again in 6 months, and it's not just those first couple of weeks. We need support and love, That is so true. That is so true. Because then coming from an alcoholic point of view, I certainly, when I was in rehab, there were certainly 2 women in the same group of 20 or 15, however we were, who had lost their husbands, and that led them to spiral out of control. And it was the occasional wine that very quickly led to 3 bottles of wine and numbing the pain that otherwise wouldn't go away. And of course, surprise, surprise, there was no support system in place for them. They kept quiet, and people let them grieve in peace.
Don't leave us alone. We're self-destructive. Don't leave us alone. I mean, everybody does that. I think grief does, any kind of trauma, people, the first reaction is like doing something that's kind of not you. You know, like if my life is screwed and ruined, then drinking too much, you know, being promiscuous, gambling, those things become very easy. Overeating, you know, all of that becomes very easy to grab onto, because if life is out of control, then I'm out of control too. And I can kind of grab onto those, you know, low-hanging coping mechanisms. I remember a friend said, "Are you tired of everyone visiting you?" You know, I had people every weekend spending the night and coming in, and, you know, I was in this condo that might've been 1,300 square feet, 1,200 square feet stacked on top of each other. You know, it's so tight, so small. And I was like, get out of my space. You know, I needed to grieve. I had 1 bathroom, you know, I was like, oh my gosh. And in hindsight, the worst thing that could have happened was me being by myself. You know, it was beautiful that people knew to kind of just be like, hey, we're coming. You know, we're going to take care of you and cook for you and play with Reagan and do whatever. My daughter, you know, play with her, to give me time to go lie in the bathtub or do whatever I wanted to do. I just saw someone ask on social media, what do I do for my friend who suddenly lost her parents? And I said, don't ask her what to do. Just do. Hire a cleaner. Go over and tell her to go get a bath and clean her kitchen while she's doing it. Do you know what I mean? Don't ask me to tell you what I need, because I don't know what I need. And instead just do for, you know, bring food. It can always freeze if there's too much, you know, just show up, because that'll change people's, you know, whole demeanor by knowing people are there and that they're not by themselves.
And remember, whatever happens, guys, your brain will try to convince you that some of it or all of it is all your fault.
Oh God.
There is shame and guilt and negative emotions, etc. So that is all hammering this person. Regardless, there's the survivor guilt. There is the guilt. Oh my God, would I have known how to do CPR better? Maybe he or she would have survived. All these kind of things. There is so much crap going on in those people's mind. The best thing you can do is just to be there and to actually, as you say, just be there and do something very simple.
And tell me you don't know what to do. That's awesome. Don't, you know, like, hey, Ash, my heart's broken. I don't know what to do, but I'm here. That's okay, because I don't know what to do. I don't expect you to know what to do. But I think one of the hurtful things, which is in no way meant to be hurtful, is people explaining away and contextualizing death in these, you know, catchphrases of like, oh, he's in a better place. Oh, but he's in heaven. Oh, I was like, better place. What better place is there than with me?
Right, it's California.
Right? Like what? Yeah, what? So, you know, these kinds of things of like, oh, well, that was God's plan. I get it. I hate God right now for that. You know, like I don't want to hear that. So those kinds of things, even though they're meant to be helpful and they're set out of a place of just discomfort, right? Where that's the first thing that's blurted out of your mouth. Like, oh, you know, I'm so sorry for your loss. He's in a better place. You know, it's like, don't say those things.
Exactly.
It's better just to say, this is not fair. This sucks. This is hard. I'm here, and mean it.
So true. So true. Wow. Far out. Wow. There are certain stages of grief. And you seem to have gone through all of them more or less at the same time. Yeah, exactly.
And they don't, there is no stage. Okay. So I write about like, Kubler-Ross, the stages of grief. Yeah. But there is no stage of grief. There's a picture that shows you like, step 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's one that has like scribbles all over it. That's what happens. I have moments now where I have something really big happen, or Reagan has something really big happen, or something gets triggered, and I'll go back to stage, -3. I don't, there is no linear path to grief. And I think that's hard too, because we see it. I can Google grief and it pops up. Oh, here's your path. It's like Candyland, the game, just do this. It doesn't work like that. And they don't talk about the fact that these stages may not happen. You might go back and forth between the different stages. And so I think being graceful to yourself and allowing yourself the grace that hopefully we give to others, and saying that 10 years from now, you might jump back to being angry or sad or, blame yourself or whatever. And that's okay. That's normal. The stages of grief are not real. The bouncing, the linear thing doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I think that's important for people to know too, is that it's okay when you don't follow that prescribed plan.
Good.
Stage. Yeah.
Good. I couldn't agree more. And it's also okay to be numb. It's certainly when my parents passed away, there was a time of numbness where I thought, wow, I should be upset now. And I was cold, analytical. My brain just protected me.
Yeah.
So it is okay that you don't burst out in tears. And if you do, that's okay too.
That's okay too.
Right, exactly.
And to do them in different 15 minutes in between each other. For me, I had died, I dove back into work. I had been given, bereavement leave, which I'm incredibly thankful for, but I dove right back into work. And I think one of the immediate challenges was my colleagues. Some of them did not know how to handle the widow in the department, And so there was, resentment in behavior. So if I was crying or if I was happy, both were kind of like, oh, I don't, why is she joyful right now? So I was singing Christmas carols once and someone got on to me and then I was singing, I was sobbing one day and a colleague said, if you're crying a year from now, we're going to really have to get you some serious help. And I was like, or do we? Can I? Well, I think I can cry a year from now. So I think other people, when they don't know how to handle you, because there is this prescribed way to grieve, and she should be devastated. Why is she having fun at a social event? All these things, and we become this weird enigma. And so with that, there becomes a lot of kind of withdrawal from people who might have supported you a lot, or might have, for me, it was my colleagues. They actually prevented me from getting this job I had been promised because I wasn't, quote, the woman that they thought I was. Talk about hurtful, yeah. And so it was, for me, that was another layer, was that my career was the only thing that I knew how to do. That's what I'm good at. And I had moved my family to this location to pursue this job. And because I, quote, wasn't the woman they thought, despite high performance, right? Despite exceeding the bar, they ruled that I wasn't eligible for an entry-level position 11 years into my career. So in hindsight, also grateful for that. Also grateful for that. But, this was only 2 years ago. That happened a year ago. So there's these added things that you just don't think about, the consequences that come at work. I heard somebody on a podcast recently say, am I that big of a burden for you that you can't be human to me? I can't be treated as a human. She had lost her baby and gone back to work, and they had treated her terribly, because again, it's uncomfortable. That office is uncomfortable. You know what I mean? When they walk past mine. So it's things you don't expect too, that kind of put you in a different state of grief, when you think you're doing really well and then you kind of slide all the way back. I think I was in worse grief after the job reality than I was when Buddy passed away, because that was my control. I controlled that. And so fighting through grief to be successful at my job and then being stopped from a position, was like, oh my God, the only thing normal in my life is now gone,
Well, insult to injury, isn't it? And it's brutal.
Very bad.
Are you still working in the same place?
I am currently. Yes, but
yeah, I was about to say, let's cut the interview right now.
Run. No. They're aware. I also have a great group of colleagues who have been phenomenal. They've been my family. And so I wouldn't trade, you look back and you're like, things happen for a reason and it doesn't make them easier or better. So you can know they happen for a reason and still want to break things and throw your temper tantrum and feel terrible, But that's actually what led me down a path that now I think is allowing me to be the woman I am, the woman that I know that I am, and be an example to my daughter. So their shutting a door really did say, you know what, then I'm going to define who I am. I'm going to be the one who writes my story, not you. You think you wrote it? I'm going to turn the page. I'm going to write a brand new chapter and you're just not going to be a part of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And hold your head up high and be graceful. And, I wish those people all the best, and they made the decision they made, and we'll both deal with, with the consequences of that.
As I keep saying, whenever you are in an emergency in an aeroplane and the oxygen comes down, you need to pull the oxygen over your own face first. You need to look after yourself first. And what a shame for the department that did not fulfill their promise, because I think they're missing out on a great asset still.
I think they're missing out.
Hey, look, boys, you will learn with hindsight.
Yes, right?
No, there's no problem with that. But I want to change the tack a bit, because so far we have been dealing with grief in response to someone who you truly, truly, truly loved, who you had a great relationship with, and everything is fine. The problem, of course, is not all relationships are like that. And it's certainly the relationship between me and my mother was rocky, to say the least. And I'm sure there was some psychopathology going on her behalf. And I was a pretty good going dick as well. So, it takes two to tango, hey? But it was hard. It was hard. It was actually brutal.
There's unanswered questions, right? There's these unanswered, yeah.
Correct. So you've got the additional layer of grieving for not having the mother that you wanted, for the grieving or the anger for or resentment for something that she had done, said, etc. And that made it really, really difficult, because now I had the roller coaster of grief. I had the guilt and shame of, oh my God, I was a bad son, because clearly it's all my fault. And then the realization, well, actually, no, she was a bitch. And then dealing with that. And it is just for fuck's
It's a mess. It's a mess.
Oh,
it's a mess. I do think I was blessed. Yeah. I think one of the things that has allowed me to kind of go on this path was saying there weren't those unanswered questions. There wasn't a what if I wish I had said this to him, because I had made a point. I had been in an unhealthy relationship before. You know what I mean? So when I got with Buddy, it was a blessing. And I tried to remember and remind him as much as he reminded me. But a lot of families that I work with, they'll talk to me about this, especially with suicide or, those kinds of things. They said, we had issues, but now there's no way to solve it. Exactly. I wish, yes, there were issues. Yes, we were sick, but now there's no way to fix it. And so death's so finite and only one party is left to pick up the pieces. So you didn't have time with mom to say, you hurt me, and to her say, I know I did, and acknowledge your feelings, process your feelings with you, and attempt to move on, or give you the choice to say that relationship's done. And I'm going to put it away. Yeah. You didn't get to say that. Yeah. Someone took you, she got taken. So yeah, it adds a whole another
And I guess that's the really, really important bit for you guys out there. So now that you sort of listen to Ash and me, there are many, many unanswered questions, and we don't have the answers. We can only share our stories to say that, guys, you're not alone. There will be a roller coaster there, and that roller coaster might very well be coming out some years down the line, because ultimately you have not been dealing with it. You buried yourself in the work so much. You work the 16 hours a day and then hit the bottle, and you keep doing that for 10 years because somehow your body holds out, and somehow you don't end up with a DUI or with a liver failure, but you just keep burying it all. But it's still there. It still needs to be dealt with one day, and it will come out at a time, I assure you, when you least want it. And that's typically when you hit sort of rock bottom, when grief is really the underlying driver for your drinking, the underlying trauma that is festering and that is pushing you into behavior that you're really not proud of. And that only makes it then worse.
I think one of the things that I would encourage anyone who's struggling with trauma or grief is professional support. You know, it's a lot to have, and a blessing to have family and friends around, but sometimes to have that unapologetic conversation with a professional who can rationalize and talk you through what you're feeling, how you're processing it, giving you different perspectives, and having that kind of professional respect for one another. I was raised kind of like mental health wasn't, you know, we don't talk about those things, and those are private things. And I don't want to be private with it. I want to share it with someone who gets paid to listen and doesn't know the players, you know, and I think something that reshaped who I was writing, creative writing, and finding something that wasn't my normal job. You know what I mean? Or my normal definition of this is who I am. It was like giving yourself permission to find a new path, you know, and say that. So for me, I would sit there and I would paint and I would write and I would dance with my daughter, and things that I really hadn't done and been silly, allowing yourself to redefine that normal life, right? Because it's not normal anymore. And so those new chapters, new experiences, and not feeling guilty about allowing yourself new joyful things, I think is really, really important. What are you laughing at?
Just because it is such a beautiful thing you have said. Aww. And it is something that echoes through every single interview that I do. It is, I spoke 2-3 weeks ago, I spoke to a PTSD sufferer, a man who got shot up in Afghanistan, CQ, and he spoke about his journey of grief, of grieving for his lost body, so to speak, and of whatever defined him was gone.
It's gone.
And then for 10 years, he went through a very bad journey. And then finally, he got the help that he needed. He started exploring, and he started exploring with complete openness. Yeah. So when the Veterans Affairs said, do you want to learn golf? He said, sure, show me how to golf. Anything.
And that's what I think for me, I was so stuck on still being that successful scholar and that woman who, you know, this is who I am. This is how I define myself. It broke me. I was broken. I was so unhappy, so unhealthy. And it got to the point where the tears had gone from Buddy to work. And my daughter would be like, are you crying over work? You know, I'm like, yeah. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, isn't that ridiculous with all that we've been through? Yeah. And to know that life is so short. I'm crying about work. Something's wrong, you know? So then I'd sit down and be like, you know what makes me happy? Writing, you know? And I would go and I'd write.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Now, and you guys, if you thought that for the whole bloody interview, she was sitting to one side, that there is actually a reason, because for the eagle-eyed hawk eyes amongst you, you will see my friend Fresno on her right shoulder. Come on, introduce us to Fresno.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So Fresno, this is Fresno as well. Fresno is my daughter's best friend, and he's a posable skeleton. Remember, I'm a criminologist, right? So who studies homicide.
Yes.
So as quirky and bizarre as I am, my daughter definitely got that gene from me. So
yes.
When she was 2, she actually adopted this skeleton from my office to be her best friend. And they did everything together, taking baths, naps, movies. We take him everywhere. His name is Fresno. She named him. And so when Buddy died, a really great friend who literally has been a savior in my life, he said, he saw her picture and he said, Ashley, you should write a children's book about Reagan dancing with this skeleton, because it's so beautiful and so dark, and something that's normally scary for a child is something that she loves. And so he said, there's beauty in that, you know? And I thought back about like our own journey with Buddy's death. Does it always have to be scary and sad, or can there be beauty in that? Do you know what I mean? And in our lives, even through scary, bad, weird things. Yeah. And so for us, I wrote My Friend Fresno, it's called The Girl Who Dances with Skeletons, My Friend Fresno. And it's about Reagan falling in love with Fresno as a best friend, despite their differences, and the fact that things that are different don't have to be scary. You know, they can actually be the things that are the greatest elements of our life if we're willing to learn about differences and celebrate, you know, what makes us unique.
Oh, how beautiful.
So fun.
Oh, how beautiful. See, dances with wolves.
Yes, dances with skeletons. Who needs that?
Exactly.
Who needs wolves?
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. How old is Reagan now?
She is 6. And the funny thing, so she was 4 when tragedy hit us. Yeah. She's 6 now. She's thriving. She's beautiful. And art truly has been her mechanism too. She's in a performing arts school that she auditioned for and got into. And she's so fun. But she actually functions as my little, CEO, CFO with me. She makes commercials and tells people where they can get the book. And it's just been fun for both of us to be a team. And my illustrator, I have to shout out about my illustrator. I don't know if Thomas Kincaid is a huge hit where you are, but he's called the Painter of Light. He's one of the most collected artists, and his nephew is my illustrator, Zach Kincaid, and he's in his own right, just a brilliant artist who I'm blessed to have been, partnered with his craft. So together we've said, this is going to be a journey for us. My hope is that it can be a full-blown, career path for me to find a way to say, you know what, I was a scholar. I will always advocate for my families and be in touch with my students, but I'm also allowed to rewrite the story the way I want to see it.
Wow. Oh, how beautiful. How beautiful. How long was your journey to write that book?
Well, I started about 3 months after Buddy passed away. Yeah. The book was written probably in a week with just a few tweaks here and there. My illustrator actually gave great feedback of the words, but he's an artist and, took his time, which was worth every moment of the wait to do that. Good. In the meantime, I wrote a teen ghost novel that we're trying to publish traditionally, and kind of going down the journey to say, what's weird and scary? Let's play with that. Kind of keep my passion going that way.
Well, exactly. And look at the sparkle in your eyes when you're saying that.
I'm excited.
That is, well, exactly right. And that is what his life is all about. Absolutely. You want to shout out about the beauty of life, because that's really what it is all about. Yeah. Yes, there are dark moments, but those dark moments, they can break us or they can define us.
And they can do both. They can do both.
And
I definitely broke.
They have to do one thing first.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah, there's no joke. So if you're in that breaking moment, that breaking point, I remember I never imagined that we just released the book this week. I never would have imagined that I'd be telling people go buy a children's book that I wrote. Do you know what I mean? I remember nights where I would sit there and go I don't know how I'm going to do this, and it wasn't pretty. I have friends that, whether it was work or Buddy, that listened to so many calls that were of a broken heart, you know what I mean? Begging for someone to give me guidance. And again, I had to trust myself to rewrite that narrative. I had to do the dirty work. I had to get therapy. You know what I mean? I had to ask for help. And then by doing that, I got the strength to say, you know what? Nope. We both deserve a better life than what could be. And so we're making it together.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, I need to get to know Fresno, so I think I have to order your book.
Please.
So that's
Order now, because if you go to our website, www.myfriendfresno.com, he's actually on pre-sale, and you can save when you order. So yes,
nice.
He's available right now.
Fantastic. And here I was hoping actually for a signed offer copy.
You're going to get a signed copy. I promise. I promise.
I'm half kidding. No,
I'll sign it when you buy it. No.
I buy it, definitely. Shit, yeah. No, the point is, I am so pleased for you. I am so pleased for you. You have gone through hell and back, and you kept going. And here you are now, 2 years down the line, recovering from a trauma that has what do I want to say? There's so many words coming into my mind all at the same time. I'm actually struggling to formulate.
Which terrible word?
No, it is just, no, I don't want to put it terrible. It is challenging. Yeah. It's confusing, overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. My life has not been pretty, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful disaster, right? It can be a beautiful disaster.
And right now we have got the chance, we have got a chance to make a choice. Let's put it this way, because you define yourself. You choose how to respond to whatever life throws you. There are times when you have to just roll with the punches and just protect yourself. But then at some stage you come up for air and actually you take stock and you look at what actually has occurred. Okay, it is, and my life has stopped right now in the way that I've known it.
And you don't have to be perfect in that. So no. I feel like certain people, like we get to this point where if we failed or if we've struggled at a moment, it kind of says like, oh my God, now we're so much further back to get to a good spot. You know what I mean? No. It doesn't have to be like that. I have many moments in my grief journey that I'm like, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I had been more graceful with this. Do you know what I mean? I wish I hadn't, done X, Y, and Z, but I also give myself grace. And I say, you didn't have a manual. You didn't ask for this. You didn't know what you were doing. So yeah, did you mess up right there? Sure did, but you're human. And that doesn't mean that you don't have to sit there and have a tally of like how far you have to fight to get good. It just get good. Just say like, okay, that was in the past. And now, reach out to any arm that you can grab and say, I will get better. And if you go back a few steps, that's okay.
I love that. I absolutely love that. No, brilliant. Ash, thank you so much for sharing your story.
What a mutually beautiful conversation. Thank you for sharing about your life and your relationship with mom and your own struggles, because it's nice to know that we're not alone. As hard as it is to hear other people's struggles, it's nice to know that there is joy, there is struggle, and they can be simultaneously lived together. And it was just really nice to hear from you and share my experience.
And I want to leave with that sentiment that it is normal to have a laugh and a cry. It is okay to laugh and the tears running down your face at the same time, because that's life. That is life. It is, you are not a textbook kind of thing that is supposedly behaving like that. If I want that, I create a computer model of sorts. Yeah. No,
that's boring.
That's right.
That's boring.
You are that mess that you are, and celebrate that mess, celebrate the positive sides and learn from the negative sides and move on and create that new you that you deserve to be. Ash, thank you so much for coming onto my show. And you guys out there, look after yourself. Bye.